Hi there. Gonna start here with a small programming note that says that this episode is the first of a two-part series about the Ringed City DLC. When we initially recorded this, we did not know exactly when the cutoff would take place, but I can tell you this first episode is going to be a little bit shorter. It's going to be about the Dreg Heap, and the episode that comes out next week, as you're hearing this, will cover the rest of the Ringed City DLC. If you like the show, please consider going to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv and supporting this show and many others like it, including Watch Out for Fireballs and Abject Suffering, and consider listening to those as well if you have not already given them a chance. This intro has been long enough, so let us get into this content. I really biffed that, didn't I?
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
At the close of the Age of Fire, all lands meet at the end of the earth. Great kingdoms and anemic townships will be one and the same. The great tide of human enterprise, all for naught.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
My name is Richard Pillbeam.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a favorite at the end of all time and space.
Yep. And
a dust-covered, blasted, ruined favorite.
Yep. And this week we are talking about the Ringed City DLC. It's kind of odd because we don't know exactly where we're going to split this. It'll be as much of a surprise to you as it is to us because of the way the DLC is paced. But as you heard, we are joined by Richard Pillbeam, a favorite guest of our listeners, and the person behind the Jerks Sans Frontiers YouTube. Is that still accurate, Richard?
Yes, at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
I'm regretting that name. It's like an albatross around my neck at this point.
It's frustrating when that kind of thing happens and you might want to rebrand because you'd have to start over, you know? You'd have to trust everyone to come over, and a lot of people maybe wouldn't because of inertia, and then
the recognition, and then it'll always be Richard Pillbeam parentheses JSF.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
just roll with it. The series is dying, and I've recently become significantly more popular because Vardy mentioned me in something.
All right.
So,
yeah.
But like I've become popular just as the series is dying, and I have nothing else to say.
It is a tragedy. That video that Vardy mentioned is the Bastard's Curse video, which we have also mentioned, which everyone should check out if you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, people know you and know your stuff. I believe. It is, as Kole mentioned, a popular guest on this show. Just to kind of, in case anybody's coming to this specifically, because I know there was a lot of like, when are you guys going to get to the Ringed City talk? Yeah. Can you briefly kind of say what you do or what you did before the series started ending?
Well, I started off looking at Bloodborne lore, but I was coming at it from a perspective that I thought was more kind of conducive to coming up with useful Bloodborne content, because a lot of people were treating that game like it was Dark Souls or Dark Souls 2, where it was all about little human stories and not having to like knit stories together from item descriptions, whereas I was more like, let's step back and look at this more broadly as more like it's like cosmic kind of story, and let's look at the worldview that's being created by this game rather than focusing on the little human stories in it. And I recently started to dip my toe into Dark Souls 3 with not the same approach, but an approach that's sort of informed by that, where I was looking at the story not just through what was written in the text of that story, but like drawing in different kind of like cultural things around Japanese beliefs that were informing the story but weren't being mentioned overtly. Things like the way that certain things were described as being like stagnant and stuff is to do with folk beliefs and things about, well, not folk, but like spiritual beliefs and things, then I brought a lot of that into it to sort of help explain like what I thought was going on in Dark Souls 2 that wasn't really overtly explained by the text of the game. And it's really early in the morning. That's why I'm rambling.
That's all right. Yeah, and also kind of visual things. So that was the thing.
Yeah, that's
that
what
first,
I do. Yes, yeah. I remember now.
Yeah, when I first found your stuff
like
in Bloodborne, it was just like, oh well, good eye. Like a lot of details on statuary and outfits and the like that I missed.
Yeah, because like the thing about like because I've worked on like films and stuff, and like if you have a director who is like, in this case Miyazaki, who is very like, who has thought everything through, that's going to be reflected in things like clothing designs and like, you know, if like Hemwick. One of the first things where I kind of cracked something was Hemwick being a crematorium. That's not something that the game outright tells you, but if you look at the design of the place, it's built to look like one. It has these little vents where all the smoke is coming out. Yeah. And that's not like Miyazaki sitting there thinking, yes, I hope that a year from now, you know, a bored graduate student is looking through this and unravels my fiendish mystery. It's just like he is clearly working with the level designer saying like, you know, we want this village. What kind of village is it? Oh, it's well, it does this. It has this relationship to the rest of the city. This is how the local like economy functions. This is the kind of like culture they would have there, and that's informed the design of it. And like one of the what I'm holding up as like proof that they had thought this stuff through is like before the Old Hunters DLC came out, I did a thing about the doll. And in that, I like showed that like you can infer just from her design that she is something related to Canehurst and that she's something related to Gurman's apprentice. Yeah. And we had no idea who Maria was, and the DLC came out, and it's like, yeah, this is Gurman's apprentice from Canehurst. And that was all there. That wasn't like speculation out of nowhere. That was all implicit in the design of that character. Because obviously they've thought through like how would someone from Canehurst dress? You know.
Yeah, it's real impressive stuff if you haven't watched it. People are listening.
Thank you.
It's super good. And the reason, part of the reason why we wanted to call you back on this is it's the last, something that we didn't mention, like this is the last bit of Dark Souls 3 content and probably the last bit of Dark Souls content. Mm-hmm. So we wanted that in part because, as Kole mentioned, you're a popular guest. We both are fans of your work. And if there's something to like wring out of this, I have faith in your ability to do so.
The other thing is that because I got this effectively the day before most people because I'm in another time zone, and I played through it and I was like, it's okay. I think it's better than Ashes of Ariandel, but it's not up there with the other DLCs they've done. And I was sort of like, it's like a 6-7 out of 10. It's all right. And then I posted that and then I went to bed. I woke up the next day and went on Twitter and saw just how badly this was going down with a lot of people. And then Gary messaged me saying, like, hey, do you want to be on this? We'd like someone who's a bit more positive. And I'm like, oh, God.
Like
my 6 out of 10.
Someone mildly more positive, but somebody who wasn't going to spend the whole episode, like, thinking me and Kole were idiots for not being super into it. Right. Like I like it more than I like Ashes too, but it would be hard not to, because I think Ashes is pretty bad. Like if Ashes is a 6 out of 10, this is a 7 out of 10. I think.
I would. It's this weird situation when you're talking about like is a game good or not. That like, okay, in a vacuum, it would be a 6 or a 7 out of 10. I wouldn't have issues with it, but it's not in a vacuum because it's the second DLC to the third game. So you can't really look at that.
No. And also it's the last. So you're going to be judging it as, something that carries the weight of finality.
And to be fair, like, and people who are screaming this while listening, like, I think of it in both of those terms. Like, I think about it in terms of like, what if it was by itself without the weight of these expectations?
Yeah.
And I still a lot of the problems I have with it, I still have, and some of the things I think are cool about it, I still think are cool in that respect. It doesn't make as big a difference. It just makes it ultimately, like, at the end of the day, there's going to be a big asterisk next to this that, in my mind, forever, that's like, this is what they chose to do with the last thing.
Yeah. And if you're screaming, we're just going to have to be okay with that. And you are as well.
Yeah. So it's getting it right up there. Like 6 or 7 out of 10 is about what we're operating on. I think we're all relatively on the same page. If that just isn't interesting to you, if you're listening to this and it's like, I don't want to listen to these guys say things they don't like about this DLC. I loved it and I don't care. I don't want to know. That's super valid. Just know, going in, that's what you're getting.
Yes.
And I promise you, we'll explain why. Like, it's not arbitrary. It's just, that's what it is. So I want everyone to know. And we should get into it. So we should start saying what this is. This is, you can get to this without doing the first DLC, but it is like a sequel to that DLC. And before we actually go into this, I want to talk a little bit about level recommendations. For this, because this is really, really hard, and even people who really love it, I think, would agree. Yes. So much so that, like, From says suggested level, I think, is 120.
Yeah, I did this on 130-ish.
Oh wow!
When I got this, I streamed it. I streamed my first playthrough. It's on my channel. I was level 130, and then by the end, I was like around 140 something, and I did not have that. I did the whole thing in 3 hours. I missed mid-year and I missed lab.
Okay.
And I didn't have really any. Yeah, I never hit a brick wall in it. I died a couple of times to the bosses. I think it was 2 each. But overall, like, I did not have many problems with this, which I think informed like my kind of reasonable positivity to it. Mm-hmm. And if I had hit a wall, I would have been a lot less positive about this.
Yeah, my story was quite the opposite, because Dark Souls 3 kind of easily lets you finish it at around level 80. And I finished the Ashes of Ariandel DLC at around like 85 or 90, somewhere in between those. And I just got my clock cleaned by the Demon Prince, a boss we're going to talk about here soon. It'd be weird if we skipped him, honestly. But for the first time in a Souls game since like my first run at the Undead Burg, trying to get the Drake sword, I guess, I ground. Like, I farmed for souls in order to get my level up to 105. And that, like, I only did that much, and not to the recommendation, because I didn't feel like literally almost doubling my characters, adding half again my character's level to make this content work.
It's such a weird choice, right? Because From knows what level people are beating Dark Souls 3 at. And they know what level people are beating Ashes of Ariandel at, and then they added at least 20 to that. So the idea that you would you have to grind to get to that recommended level, and they didn't have to do that. It is a really weird thing to do.
It's so strange because this is not like, a lot of people have defended this being kind of anticlimactic by saying, well, it's not the climax, it's a side story. But it's a side story that's scaled up significantly more than the final boss of the game is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The final boss of this is like a gigantic meat wall tank that if you go into him expecting like a challenge on par with Soul of Cinder, you're going to die.
Yeah.
He's much, much tougher. So it's weird that this is being talked about like it's a side story. Why is it? I mean, it seems very much like you're supposed to go there after beating Soul of Cinder.
Yeah.
Even the environment, like, is reminiscent of where you fight Soul of Cinder. But it's so... like, I was co-oping against the final boss with Alison Baker for, like, an hour, and she just couldn't, like... Like, it was 4 of us versus the final boss, and we just, like... It was just this horrible war of attrition that we kept losing.
Yeah. It is, and narratively, that's, and I understand this is a minor complaint, but it is weird that the final boss of this, and there's no reason for spoilers, everyone who's listening to this has played it, that Gale is that much more formidable than the literal conglomeration of all of the people who linked the fires before you. This cosmic force.
It is like you have ended up in the next new game cycle in terms of difficulty, like, but somehow by accident. So when people are listening, just know I was a little bit higher level than Kole, but not to the recommended level, and that's going to influence our experience. On one hand, you can say like, why didn't you guys get to the recommended level? On the other hand, like, the recommended level makes no sense. So getting to it after beating
it and the super hard DLC that came before this, like not as hard, but like I think Rita's really hard. I felt like this should be a good enough level.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Also, this thread, if you decide to chase it down to its end, begins in the Cathedral of the Deep, the 4th or 5th area that you can go to.
Yeah. You know, we talked about that in the Ashes of Ariandel thing, where you go to Ashes of Ariandel and enemies are dropping large shards, and yet you're still supposed to fight Frida at the end of that.
Yeah.
You know, here it's like they give you slabs, but you have to be in your final build, you know, to make this make any sense at all. You know, like you're not still upgrading stuff. You can if you want to play with the new weapons, and that goes into another problem where it's like, unless you're doing PvP, there's nothing to do with them after this, you know. But anyway, From told us that it would be very hard. That's kind of fair. And they were right. You know, but I still don't think it would be easy if I was at 120, just because of you know, a lot of the difficulties are not just in the bosses, they're in these environmental things, which we'll get into here.
Yeah. So should we give like a small summary of like where Ashes left off? Because that directly informs this, right? Ashes took place in this painted world that is being ruined. There is a person, a denizen of this world, who has ventured into ours with a scrap of the painting to seek out materials to make a new painting. People inside there, I believe his nieces, are working to make a new painting, a new home for man, and he is looking for the dark soul. And, you know, you as this kind of champion of Ash, I forget, what is it, the Unkindled? Yes, you as the Unkindled are, you know, kind of uniquely qualified to go in and help them in there, and then also chase after Gale and kind of follow in his footsteps.
Yeah.
Gale
is working on it.
We'll leave little messages for you.
Yes.
Yeah, even down to the two bonfires that teleport you here, which have a strip of red cloth on them. There's one of them that's either near the mysterious snake statue that did not get elucidated upon at the end of Ashes, or one of them that is right before the Lord of Cinder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this transports you to our first area, the Dreg Heap, in this kind of upper area.
Yes. So the Dreg Heap looks very similar to the area around the Kiln of the First Flame. It is Inception City, and that it is kind of folded over on itself.
We use Doctor Strange City now, Cole.
Oh, okay,
now
cool.
That Doctor Strange has come out. So,
all right.
So you know.
Wait, let me update my text file. Okay. But yeah, you know, kind of come into this place, and it feels a little bit like you're exploring this thing that you can only see from a distance before. I think this whole place is very pretty from a distance. Up close, it's very drab.
Yeah.
Lots of recycled assets as well.
Yeah. And it looks cool. Like, it is cool to be walking on the sides of these things and have them kind of, you know, collapse in on themselves. Like, that is a very neat thing that is going to be kind of a thematic part of this first first section here that I dig. When you leave here, you know, you leave this little antechamber, you come out, you meet your first NPC right away, the stone-humped hag, who is a merchant here, formerly a wet nurse to a lord. And kind of, I don't understand the purpose of this merchant.
No,
kind of gameplay wise,
to get like five more human effigies, or sorry, whatever they are, embers.
Yeah.
Well, you get some lore about her off her ashes after she dies, and I think that's kind of, you get quite a few divine blessings off her from memory. You get like 2 or 3. Yeah, but I think she's really there just for story reasons rather than mechanical reasons. Yeah.
By appearance, she looks like a one of the Londor pilgrims. She's got the stone on her back. Good.
No, this completely like ruined a lot of my theories that like now, because I used to think all of these pilgrims must come from Londor by default, but now it's like, no, apparently anyone can become a pilgrim, and this is like she's like, there's a theory that she is Emma.
Yeah.
Vardy talks, because one thing about the Ring City that's like, it becomes clear once you start looking at item descriptions that like this is happening in the future. Like, we've actually gone forward in time, like however many long, like
centuries.
We don't know how, but we're like way ahead, and like we'll meet another character who we've met before as well. And like the theory that people was, because she's described as being a wet nurse to royalty, and she talks about Lorien, but she talks about him in a way that suggests she's familiar with who he was, rather than this is a historical record.
No.
There's a theory that this is Emma, the priestess of Lothric, and that after however much time has passed, she's turned into a little pilgrim thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
Because there's all this Lothric stuff kind of at the top. The top kind of sedimentary layer of the Dreg Heap is all bits and pieces of Lothric Castle and Lothric Knights and stuff. So it's not out of the question.
Right.
No, it's not. I mean, we should mention that we're going to be going through these different strata of time. But ultimately though, when I think about that being Emma, and I consider that too because like that's the other wet nurse we know of.
Yeah.
It feels indicative of a lot of Dark Souls 3 kind of lore stuff where it's a connection that doesn't add up to anything. Like Emma still being here doesn't mean very much to me. And it doesn't help me understand this world or understand what's going on or these characters any better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unto a purpose. Like today on Twitter, I was like, the way I think about it is like when you're a little kid and you get that little plastic thing that's like, here's a button you can do, here's a zipper, here are 2 laces you can tie, here's, and it's teaching you to make the connections, but at the end of the day, you're not wearing a shoe. Right. Like it's not like you're going to put on a shoe you can walk with. You've just made a connection. And it's like, oh, good for you. Oh, like we can figure out that this is Emma. Yeah. But, and there's no but for a lot of these things.
Right.
And it just kind of, bums me out. We're going to get to that where like we get to the Dark Souls 2 callback here, which it was a personal pet peeve of mine because I like Dark Souls 2 a lot. And there's no reason for it to be this.
Yeah.
It just represents the strata and there's a visual iconography reason, but not a lore or story reason that kind of like feels like putting together Legos, kind of like from different sets.
To me, the issue with the DLC story in general is that like it's basically just underscoring things we kind of already knew. It doesn't add a great deal, and it's things we could kind of like I don't know, intuit already.
Yeah, and the things it adds are duplicative. It's a little bit like a magic act almost.
Yeah,
like haha. There are reveals that barely qualify as such. It is again just addition. Yeah. So the other possibility that we haven't considered is that Lothric might just be swimming in wet nurses.
it's the guidance counselors at Lothric High are just like, listen, go into boob milk.
Yep. It's the land of milk, and honey.
Yeah. And also home of the law. It's just milk, and honey.
But she is here, so the Stoneham tag is here to kind of like take in this grand sight. She's a sightseer, and she kind of explains the mechanics of this, that great kingdoms and anemic townships will be one and the same. The great tide of human enterprise, all for naught. Again, collecting in this ring around the central point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I appreciate this kind of as a natural extension to stuff we've seen in Dark Souls 3, where the lands of the Lord of Cinder are converging. Mm-hmm. Like this does feel like on a long enough timeline, it would draw in Dark Souls 2 and, it would draw in Lordran and draw in these areas, like until eventually it became this kind of Katamari of different Souls games. Like I can dig that. Like as a thing, I have some specific problems with what they chose to use, but I think that's cool.
Yeah.
And visually, again, looking out over this vista, like it's super cool looking. Like a lot of the people who have defended this, when I've complained about it, have just been like, it's so pretty, dude. Yeah. And it's like, it's cool looking. It looks really, really neat, and I'll give it that.
I think I would have liked it a lot more. Like had that also not been the reveal for when you get to the kiln in the vanilla game. Yeah. You see the same vistas, and it's like, I think had that not been there, had we just fought like Soul of Cinder in some like arena, and then we got the DLC and it's the Doctor Strange city. Like I think this would have had much bigger impact on me, but I was kind of used to it at this point.
Yeah. There's a weird little trivia bit here. In general, it's not your advantage to kill any NPCs in this. Like, Usually you want to do that to see if you get something cool. It's not really worth killing any of them, but if you kill her, you actually can kind of fuck yourself over because she turns into an angel, which we're going to talk about at length here in a little bit.
She turns into a non-violent angel. It does. The angel that she turns into doesn't attack.
It'll only attack you if you attack.
Oh, if you attack her, sorry.
Yeah.
Fuck me. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So it will attack back. But this angel operates differently than any other angels we're going to meet.
Yeah.
If she dies as a natural extension of the quest line, then it is non-violent. That is what I mean. If you get to the end of the to the end of the content and then come back, you can pick up her ashes off of her corpse, and there is a non-violent angel that is hovering above it.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, she also acts as your quest giver. You can ask her about the ringed city, and mentions like, yes, the dark soul is here and better, well left alone, and says you need to jump through the ring of this kind of fallen tree to get there, and this is where she mentions Lorien.
Yeah. Yep. Which is actually like, we'll get to that in a minute. How that was kind of scrubbed from the boss a little bit. Mm-hmm. You get to your first drop here, which is going to be kind of a geographical feature of these. And I want to see how you guys feel about these, because this was something I kind of dug at first and then eventually grew to resent as a game design thing. I started disliking it.
Was it our conversation where I pointed out that From has been better at signaling stuff in the past?
Well, I mean, that was a good point. That was the conclusion I'd come to as well. But then also, it's I think you brought up the good point with the gutter, which has literally none of this, just has lights.
Yeah. Well, the people who got the press copy to review, they were posting that like, I got lost in the Dreg Heap for ages because I couldn't figure out where I was going, and it turns out that I think what happened was the way that it signals it is that there's messages with a little phantom of Gale over them, and he's pointing. And they have little, like, red bits of his hood that he's torn off to mark them. And you can safely fall down there, but not other places. And it's never really explained how that functions. But apparently, like, those weren't there until it went live.
Okay.
That actually confirms my suspicions.
Yeah. The people who had initially played it, like, were saying, like, I got lost forever in the Dreg Heap because I couldn't figure out where the safe drops were. But with Gale there, it's like, it's really obvious. There's literally a phantom pointing where you can drop.
Yeah. And it's significant that it's Gale. Like, Gale is helping you, and that's to a purpose, which we'll get to. What's interesting about these things, too, if you look up real close, there are skulls in the kind of, like, light that comes off of these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I saw that today. I never noticed it before, but I saw it in a YouTube video. It's the same thing that if you freeze frame his cloak attacks, when you get to him, there are tiny skulls. They're like kind of energy-looking ghost skulls in it that show up here as well, which is kind of cool, detail. But these things, it just, like we were talking about, Cole, like From has done this a lot, like signal drops you can make. Mm-hmm. This just feels like kind of singularly sloppy to me.
Yeah. I mean, it feels last minute, and I feel not good to know that it is, but yeah, it makes sense.
Well, it's still a problem that like those reviewers were having a hard time knowing where to go. Like, again, just put a couple of lanterns down there. Like, it's literally stuff you've done since the first game.
Yeah.
And like, it's not even just those drops that are safe, because like later on there's like a poison swamp area, and I was knocked off one of the big like tree root things above it, and I thought, I'm dead. Yeah. And I fell, and there's not even like a falling animation. I'm just standing up again, and it's like, okay,
yeah, all right, well, okay.
I think the implication is like that everything's turning to ash, so the ash is acting like it's like a truck full of pillows, like in a cartoon. That it's just like a safe landing.
Yeah, it's so you're either falling into piles of ash, like you are in these drops at the start that you could easily survive. They're not far enough, and later on you're falling onto kind of these, I guess, sigils of safe fall almost. And like this is to a purpose. Like, doing these large leaps of faith is dramatic visually, and this is a non-logical space that they expect you to navigate, in kind of illogical ways. Like, I understand the heightened thing they were going for. Just find a happy medium between having these be marked by a small little piece of cloth and a big glowing neon sign that says jump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is fine, but it just, at some point I was just like, this feels contrived and gamey.
Yeah.
To me. You kind of head down, and we start running into our first enemy, kind of on this like slope. You look down onto what looks like a ruins of a church to me, and there's this slope with enemies that kind of come up, and these are our first hostile enemies, the Merkmen.
Yeah. Hey, remember the Deep and how we had all those questions about what the Deep would resolve to?
Yeah.
So these are cool looking enemies. They kind of look like little Titanite demons a little bit. They're real spindly. They attack with these kind of like long staves. They've got like blue smoke hanging around them. But yeah, they're animated by basically stagnant souls that have hung around for too long and been kind of tainted by the force that is known elsewhere as the Deep.
Yeah, and they attack you with these like giant humanity sprite things occasionally.
Yes.
They'll like summon them up and like charge at you. Yeah.
And they spawn. They kind of continuously spawn. In this area where you're going to head to, they just kind of, there are a lot of them that show up. And this is the first of, I want to say, 6 mechanics in this DLC designed to make you run. That's going to continuously be a thing. Like, this is one of the more gentle ones. Other ones are more explicit, but unless you want to stand and just kind of like fight off, 10 plus of these things every time they exist, you're going to run through. And that is, if I had to pinpoint like one thing about the DLC that I don't like, or the worst thing, like there are lots of things I don't like, but the one thing that I think is like the fatal flaw is that it is so pretty and such an interesting space to explore, and the game doesn't want you to explore it.
No.
Yeah.
There's again 6. Like there are a lot of mechanics in this that are designed just to make you go forward all the time. And it gets introduced right at the very first enemy you meet. Can fall into that category.
Yeah. These things individually are not that difficult to take out, but if you sleep on them, they will eventually get after you, especially if you let the ranged ones stick around. Those humanity sprites, I guess deep sprites that they shoot at you are no joke.
Yeah, they don't fuck around.
Yeah.
And so
they can pull you under the ground as well.
Yeah.
Kind of grab attack where they like it's like they're pulling you down into the deep with their like scythe things.
Which is a super cool looking attack, actually.
Yeah.
The first time I got hit by that was in the next like big set piece thing, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Before we get to that, though, if you run down this, you go to your left. We're introduced to another new enemy here.
Yeah.
The Herald Knights.
Yes, these big boys jump down, and I really like fighting these things.
Yeah, I really like Herald Knights, but I think the DLC uses them badly kind of after this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never see another one alone again.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue. They're an enemy that appears to be designed for one-on-one encounters in places where you can do plunging attacks.
Yeah.
Because what happens is if you do a plunging attack on them, you get a unique plunging animation where you like grab onto the armor and you kind of stab them like 3 times in the head. So it's kind of teaching us, okay, this is like a little kind of mini boss enemy where the idea is you have to get above them and drop down on them. And all the Herald Knights we meet from now on will be in a place where you can drop. But they start making them like at one point there's like 5 at a time, and you can't really manage that. And it's
and again, and this is going way back to old complaints, but like, if you're fighting one of these multiple ones at a time, you even if you manage to jump on one, stab it, you jump off due to the lack of poise in this game. Like if you get hit and there are 4 of them chaining attacks, like that's probably it for you. It's just, it comes down to like, I don't think the DLC has good encounter design, which is kind of a bummer, because in the last DLC I think the encounter design was better, but the enemies were, other than the wolves, were worse. The wolves were very cool. The Axiolans in the last DLC were bad. Here all of the enemies I enjoy fighting individually quite a bit. The Ring Knights, which we'll run into later, I actually like fighting a lot.
Oh, they're so good.
There's lots of good fights. It's just the encounters are so stacked against you, or just designed for you to run through, which we'll get into with the archer summoning guys and all of these things. So it kind of bums me out, because I like fighting these things. I would love to fight them more. There's just this one that, like the test one, is the only one that's, the bunny slope is the one that's worth it. And you go up here, you don't get anything. I thought this would be the critical path, because on first look, it looks like it is. This is where you go to get it's the Azure dagger.
It's Aquamarine.
Yes. Yeah, you gain a dagger that is, the internet seems to believe belongs to the second boss of this area, but there's not, maybe
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Let's talk about the appearance of these Herald Knights. They look really great. They're designed to me as reminiscent of the heads of the Ulysseal dudes a little bit.
Yeah.
They're these big kind of bulbous dudes. So what we're seeing in the Dreg Heap and in the Ring City itself is kind of the remnants of these expeditionary forces that have like made a run for the Dark Soul, or made a run for what the city is kind of built to house and protect. Again, the Dark Soul. So these Herald Knights came and they were claimed by the Dark. They sank into the dark with the Legion. Their armor did, where their cavities bloated in grotesque displays, never again to fit any ordinarily shaped bodies. And these guys, like their big armor, completely wrapped around with these roots, and instead of having faces, they have these like black holes with this swirling darkness around them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is why the plunging attack does extra damage,
right?
Because you land on that, and like if you have a bow, you can like headshot them, and they get a unique like stagger animation where all this like humanity is sort of leaking out of them.
Nice.
Yeah. I didn't think they looked like the Elysial guys to me, but I can kind of see it. They always look like they read as bird's nest to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. They
look like
Snorlax. Yeah, like corrupted
like,
Snorlax.
If I could have like one like a life size of any of the Dark Souls enemies, I would have a life size Herald Knight that I used as like a beanbag. Just like lie on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know its weak point, so you have leverage over
exactly.
it. It looks bad.
If it ever goes Chucky on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is the beginning of something that kind of started grating on me throughout this DLC, where you keep being told about this, like, all these envoys of knights that have been sent throughout time to the Ringed City, as though everyone's always known about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll later on get information that, like, says, oh yeah, this was known about, like, at the very, like, the most distant point at which people can have known about this was Dark Souls 2.
Yep.
No one has ever mentioned this thing, but everyone talks about it like it's this known thing. Like, oh, it's true what they say about the Ringed City. And it's like, what?
My mother always told me a prophecy about. Yeah.
Yeah, I also find that frustrating.
Yeah.
The hag going like, oh, you must be here for the Dark Soul. That's why everyone else is coming. It's like, what? it reminds me of like an FMV adventure game where like a character is addressing you through the screen.
Oh yeah.
Like giving you this. Because one of the problems with like these games story, it's not a problem per se, but something they run into is that because you have a silent protagonist, there's not a lot of character motive for the things that you do. Mm-hmm. I understand why I'm doing things in this game, and like Bloodborne is really bad with this. Like I understand why I did it as someone who has bought the game and is playing it because a new area has opened up.
Yeah.
But it's never really communicated why the character would do that. Like, what? I don't know why my character is picking a fight with a giant spider at all. Right. I know why I'm doing it because, like, it's obviously the boss. But like, if I fell through a lake and met a giant spider in real life, I would run away.
Right. And
you're not like, and Dark Souls 1 did a pretty good job of kind of leading you along by having Frampt kind of show up intermittently. You had Frampt and you had other NPCs who would tell you like, oh, you need to go over here and do a thing. But like the Ring City is literally just like, you're here, and then like, well, I guess you're here for the Dark Soul, and it's like never been communicated at any point. Oh, I guess we're here. I all right then.
Well, you're here for Gale. You know, when Gale's on screen, just everybody should be asking, "Where's Gale?"
That's going to get ridiculous toward the end.
100%. Yeah. And then also the expeditionary forces thing kind of bothers me as well, just because it is just adding new elements.
Yeah.
You know, and with the Ring Knights, where it comes up, where they form like a duplicate function, they actually work with another group that they talk about. You know, and there's no so adding these guys as a lore bit isn't really necessary. I would have preferred these to be the final form of the Merc Dwellers or something like that. The Mercmen.
Yeah.
Can kind of grow up. If you needed a big tank enemy, you know.
At this point, the last thing the world needs is yet another group of knights who have sworn to fight the Abyss.
Yeah.
Yep. But
because
no,
we're on like number 6 at this point.
Yeah, and this DLC is a clown car of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember like rolling my eyes at the Millwood Knights when it was like, oh, here's a cool group of Viking guys. I wonder what their backstory is. Oh, they're fighting the Abyss.
Yeah. And this bothers me. In fact, one of the main premises of this bothers me because I kind of thought that Dark Soul was Manus, and I kind of thought the Dark Soul split and turned into the Daughters of Manus. Yeah.
There's lots of Dark Souls.
Yeah.
There's there's lots of little bits, which is that ultimately gets swept up by Gale. Like he Roombas it up, but who knows what it did between now and the future.
It's implied that it was always there.
Yeah, but it's like a long enough timeline. Yeah, I know. It's dumb, but okay. I've given up. Like I don't actually consider anything in Dark Souls 3 to be part of the canon. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think that's not fair or anything. But it's
Dark Souls 3 is a story that it kind of feels like no single person was in control of.
Yeah.
It goes off. Like I've talked to a lot of people. Like people think I'm negative about this, but like the private messages I get, oh god, like. But like it to me, the core issue with Dark Souls 3's story is that the actual like the plot of the game is the most straightforward thing they've ever done. It's literally like you show up at filing 5 minutes after the game starts, and they say, "Hey, get the Lords of Cinder's ashes and bring them back." And that's all you do plot-wise throughout the game. There's no, like, twists at all. And by twists, I don't mean, like, M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, like, there's no, like, structure to it. It doesn't, like, go anywhere. But then as you're doing that, you are getting these little, like, it's going off kind of on tangents. Because all the Lords of Cinder are, like, they have a reason they abandoned the throne. Mm-hmm. And that reason is usually connected to, like, we have another way to deal with the fire fading. Mm-hmm. And that's not even all the like it happens with Oseros as well. Like, and so you get all these little hints that like, oh, there's more going on here. There's all these like kind of there are like Aldrich. He leaves the throne because he envisions I can create a new age that's not an age of fire or an age of dark. You know, like Oseros. I can start creating dragons who are everlasting and live outside the cycle. You got like Lorien and Lothric saying I won't link the fire because there's a scholar who has told me that. Something else is going to happen, and like Gertrude worshipping angels, but none of them go anywhere. Right. And they're all the thing about them is that they're not little self-contained mysteries because they're developed to the point where it's like, okay, this is actually a plot point now, and you kind of have this is like a Chekhov's gun thing. You have to now see this through because you've dedicated so much time and space to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like the Profaned Flame is a perfect example of that because like if the Profaned Flame had literally just been like an item description saying, oh, Sullivan found a flame that wouldn't go out, and with it he conquered Anor Londo. I don't think people would be irritated by it. But the Profaned Flame gets its own area, and it gets all this like increasingly contradictory stuff kind of shoveled onto it about how like it's created by a group of priestesses, and it burns away human flesh, and the priestesses are kind of implied to be connected to Alsana from Dark Souls 2. And it's kind of connected to, like, it's located above where the ruins of Izalith are, so is the Profaned Flame the flame the Witch of Izalith lit? And, like, Yorm stops the Profaned Flame by sitting on a throne, and also the Profaned Flame came from the sky, but the city is underground. And it's just like... and then you find a Profaned Flame pyromancy that's on a giant that is in a cell that is connected. And it's such, like... You have to resolve all this. It's not like... like Dark Souls 1 had little self-contained mysteries in it, like Priscilla. Where, like, you're told everything you kind of need to know about her, which is, like, she's half something, half dragon, and because she's a half-breed, she doesn't belong in the world, so she's been drawn into this painting that is a place for things that do not belong. And that's really all you need to know about that character, but, like, here it's like they start with something like that, and they layer all this stuff onto it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's when people are saying, like, well, that's not really the plot, you're not supposed to care about the Profaned Flame. You're not supposed to care about this stuff because it's like a little tangent. It's kind of like a problem with the storytelling that people are invested in this stuff because the main plot of the game is not very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I was just about to say that. Like, the thing with those side things, in addition to it being none of them are, complete enough, is that they're all more interesting than the main plot.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of. In a weird way of like the advisor missions in Dragon Age Inquisition, where like the main thing you're doing is super boring, but you're sending your advisors off to do really cool things you only hear a little bit about.
Yeah.
It's like that. Like I would love to play a game that is about, Lothric.
Yeah.
But you just get the sense that like the game isn't really about that. It's little tiny like, partly developed little bits to kind of do shorthand for a lot of different kingdoms and make up for that loss, that illusion of kind of a lot of time going by. there are all these different kind of individual issues with the flame going out. But they're not. None of them are going to be complete, and all of them are cooler than just the kind of macro story that is something we've been dealing with since Dark Souls 1.
Yeah,
and the thing about this DLC explicitly being set in the future is, even though you buy into there's many worlds, time is convoluted, this kind of implies that canonically nothing came of any of that,
right?
Because we're just in the Age of Fire is ending again, even though it's implied to be many, many, many ages now. It's far enough in the future for Lothric Castle, which is still standing in the present, to have basically sunk.
Yeah.
So it's there was no Age of Deep, there was no everyone turns into a dragon, there was no Profaned Flame. It went nowhere. And that's people have said that's thematic. It's saying that there was no point in struggling, but I get that it's thematic. It's just not very interesting because we've gone through this 3 times already.
And that places kind of this weird primacy on the most recent thing that you've been exposed to. This DLC is another Hail Mary pass. By going into Ariamis, we have seen another way to subvert the fire. We've seen hey, we're trying to create a new refuge. I don't know, maybe paintings this time. And you're following this to its end, and its end happens to go all the way back to something that is a direct result of the key players from the very beginning of the Age of Fire. When Disparity came.
Ariandel, when that came out, that is also the same story. It's only instead of a Lord of Cinder abandoning their throne, it's Frida abandoning the Church of Londor. Mm-hmm. And it's and people are saying, oh, it's really good that it's underscoring the themes of the game by having this world that's rotting away and needs to be burned away. And it's I get that, but we just had a whole 60-hour game saying that over and over again. And at some point, you kind of cross a line from underscoring a theme to just being repetitive.
Yeah. If you squint really hard, what you can get out of the DLC is that, it's all about cycles. Again, step back from a corkboard with tons of red, twine and tacks between all of the different elements, and then just say oh, it's a cycle. The thing is fading. We know. And it's immensely frustrating that that's what it ended up going out on. Not that I don't know what you would do other than do that. It ends up being another piece of evidence that there shouldn't have been sequels to Dark Souls 1. Mm-hmm. For all of Dark Souls 2, as much as I love it, there are a lot of problems with it kind of story-wise, and the parts where it falls down is it is trying to kind of do this again, this thing that was encapsulated kind of perfectly in Dark Souls 1. I feel like Demon Souls and Dark Souls have sufficiently different flavor with some of the same themes to make it work, whereas Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 do not. And you can't
there's kind of there's almost a structure to this as a trilogy where Dark Souls 1 establishes that the fire is fading, so we'll start a cycle by linking it. Then 2, once you work Aldia into it, becomes about this cycle is continuing. We have to figure out a way to end it. And then Dark Souls 3 it gestures in the direction of the cycle is now going to end. This is actually the apocalypse of this place. Everything is going to stop, but it doesn't again develop it properly.
Yeah.
If this had been actually an apocalyptic game, if it hadn't have ended with you linking the fire, because the end of the game, again, it's there's 3 endings, and it's you can link the fire, you can let the fire go out, or you can do this Londor thing. And it's I think if this had ended with something other than that, if you had just some kind of end of Evangelion style thing happen at the end, I would be a lot better disposed toward it. But it's all this does is set up that Dark Souls 4 is going to happen at some point, and it's also going to be about linking the fire.
Yeah.
It's
something where I've said this for a while now. The bravest ending one of these games could have would be to, if you actually ended the cycle, and it's something that people say the ending of this DLC implies, which I don't buy, which we'll get to next episode. But and show a populous place. I would love it fade out, and then there's a city that people are alive and relatively thriving. And it's that's actually a sense of stakes for this. It's not super bleak, but it's you actually done. It would actually even make restarting the Age of Fire seem meaningful if that's the moral choice you want to make. This idea that a temporary reprieve is better than nothing, even if it's unnatural. Give that a sense of stake to it. Even if that's the same choice we made in Dark Souls 1, it would still be more meaningful if you showed what that consequence was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The end, like Bloodborne, the childhood's beginning, ending in Bloodborne, like that to me is a really good, because like Bloodborne's endings are basically like you can continue the cycle or you can become trapped within it, but then it has that third, like the quote unquote true ending. I don't know if it's the true ending or not, where like it is completely ambiguous as to what actually happens after that, but it has a note of finality to it, that like this has ended and we are moving on, and it's not clear what happens next. And this is again all part of another cycle, but it's like, okay, this like we're not just going on and on forever. We've like moved onward, and I think Dark Souls 3 needed something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And the ending of this DLC is not that.
Nope.
Which we'll get to. Like the phrasing, the kind of the interpretations that this is actually kind of a final move on thing really bug me. We should move though. We gotta get into more of the DLC. This is good, but we have to we got to go to sleep at some point. It's so the actual critical path here is not obvious. There's an item to kind of on this ledge in this little church looking area that is super tantalizing. You're going to go to it. But maybe you that's not the critical path. That looks like a trap. You're not going to go to it. It is actually the only thing you have to do, which is a weird bit of signaling because the floor has to crumble there for you to fall. In a really kind of cool set piece, you fall through the side of a building through a stained glass window onto the side of a church. It's super cool until like the fourth or fifth time you do it, where like it starts becoming pretty silly.
It's the Grand Archives as well.
What's that?
Oh yeah.
You're falling. You fall into the Grand Archives, and you fall. I noticed this the other day. The window you fall through is the window that's broken in the Lothric Grand Archives that you visit.
Oh,
so
really?
What?
Oh, that's awesome.
And
really
it's
cool
like,
detail.
yeah. But I don't know if it's a cool detail. Like, did they have like a window breaking animation they didn't use, and they're recycling it here or not? I don't know. But it's just a neat little thing you notice.
I totally didn't draw the connection between this library and the Grand Archive. That's a good catch.
When you fall here, this is where the there's tons of Merkmen down here. This is where they did the grab attack on me.
Oh yeah,
which was kind of cool.
It drops you right into the center of them.
Yes, and they just kind of go forever. And there's a caster who is already firing up with one of its humanity shots that it's going to kind of shoot at you here. These great soul dregs. Spell
this
that they cast.
This almost always got me in one shot, and it fires very quick, and so all I got was like this flash, a couple of frames, and I was like, is that a humanity? And I'm dead. And it was actually kind of cool. Like I wasn't angry yet. Again, Cole, don't stop. Like you can't stop here. And when you go outside, you hear the scream, and this is the angels, which we've alluded to a little bit, but we have to talk about these things. So this should be I think footnoted with the fact that we played a harder version of this DLC. They patched these things to be less immediately deadly. I haven't gone through with the patch. When I went and refreshed my memory, they were dead. So I cannot tell you if it's instant death. But this is mechanic number 2 that is meant to just shoo you along. This is the person with the fake chainsaw who chases you through the haunted house because they've got to get they've got to get throughput. Describe these angels, Gary. They look a little bit like the floating pilgrim butterflies. They could be the final kind of evolution of those. I don't know what that would mean. They're explicitly called angels. However, they look most like angels, which bugs me because angels were something we all wanted answers to in the DLC. And if this is what caused the Lothric Holy War, I don't fucking know. We don't ever actually find, there's no item attached to these things. There's no way to find kind of text about them. Right. And gameplay wise, this is also something where I don't mind this that much, but it gets a lot of credit for being unique when it's essentially Old Yarnum. Right. This next section is because they're turrets. They float in the air. After a scream, they will kind of rapid fire energy bolts at you, which you have to run from piece of cover to piece of cover. With the added, I guess this would be a third mechanic, so we maybe are looking at 7. If you stop, they sprinkle a curse on you. Yeah. So not only do you have to constantly run, you also can't stop to rest for very long. No.
And this first one is actually mercifully pretty kind in that you will run right by its spawn.
Right.
The way these things work is that they have this kind of grotesque boy, I don't even know how to describe it. This kind of grub,
it's
a grub tree.
It's a wacky waving arm inflatable tube man. Yeah. It looks like kind of like a nascent form of these things. Again, it is people turning into trees. They blend in with the scenery because they are gray, like a lot of the surfaces in this. And mercifully, they do not respawn if you can find them. So if you take out the summoner, then boom, no more angels.
I played through this last night with the subsequent patch. And the angels are significantly less damaging now. They do less damage, and they have like a spread to their attacks. So if like the ones that when we went through this, they fight, like you were saying, it's like Durer and Old Yharnam. It's like this constant stream. But now they have like this massive spread to that they'll just kind of like flare out as they're attacking you. So if you stand in, like I was standing in one place, and like almost all of them were just going around me.
Wow.
So they're really not that much of a threat anymore.
Yeah.
It's still something where you can't explore until you deal with them. Right. So this first one where like, you're not as in as much danger, which would definitely cut down on kind of loading screens. But it's still, I imagine they still function as a way to kind of keep you moving more or less constantly. It's like the Herald Knight where like
this first one is fine.
Yeah.
And then they kind of get ridiculous.
Yeah. And like, even if it does summon in, you're only exposed to its fire for a very short period. Like there's a building you can run behind and then into. So that is fine as well. God help you if you decide to try and take these things out at range. Because
it's possible, but it's not worth it.
Yeah, because
and they respawn anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the different set pieces where these pop up again, but this is the most merciful. And again, like this is another line of people turning into trees, maybe.
Okay, I've been trying to write something about these angels because it's irritating the shit out of me. Because like when we learn about angels in Lothric, and everything we learn in Lothric points to them being like the classical romantic idea of an angel. Like there's this painting of a winged knight who's like descending from the clouds with this like halo of light around them and these huge like feathered wings, and then we later meet winged knights who are descending from on top of a tower, and they've got the feathered wings, and when we meet what's probably Gertrude's corpse, there's feathers everywhere. So it's pointing to, and like Lorien and Lothric's room is also covered in feathers. So it's kind of pointing toward like these are like, I mean, not biblical angels, because the way angels described in the Bible isn't what we tend to think of as angels, but like that kind of classical notion of an angel. Here they look like wasps. They look like things that have, like, there's a recurring thing throughout this DLC of like insect kind of imagery. And the angels look a lot like, we'll later on meet these locusts. And some of the locusts aren't hostile, and they're described, and they're preachers, which is weird. And they're described as like these locusts are these preachers, and they give these sermons, which I guess we'll hear when we get there, that are trying to like beckon you to come to the dark soul. Basically, he keeps repeating like, fear not the dark to you. So my take on this whole angel thing is that like, if these are the same angels that we found in Lothric, then it would make sense, like if they're like the locusts giving these sermons, that like maybe Gertrude had a vision of one of these things, and it gave her this sermon about seeking the dark, that the same sermon that we're getting here. And that's what led to that civil war in Lothric, because I can't think of any other explanation.
Yeah.
Because and like the pilgrim, like you were describing them as being trees. To me, they look like a pupa, like something that's growing out. So it's like the thing is like when Emma becomes an angel, the angel in the sky, like it flies around and it will endlessly respawn. It's not being summoned. The angels that we're fighting here are being summoned by these like half-formed pupa things that are hatching out of pilgrims.
Yeah.
So it's like those angels are like a projection of like something coming from that pupa thing.
Yeah.
Whereas Emma has actually made the metamorphosis properly. Which makes me wonder if... Yeah, like, because there's all those pilgrims outside Lothric Castle, which makes me wonder if like one of them like was projecting an image to Gertrude and that's what she saw.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, maybe.
But I generally get the idea that like someone changed their mind halfway through writing this.
It's also frustrating looking to maybe Emma's transformation, because her body is still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the angel is up above.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that could definitely be the case. That could explain it. I think that it's not even like a stretch. It just, I would have, for something, I mean, I guess it plays into that, the problems we were talking about before we jumped through the side of the archives, where like, maybe joke's on me for feeling like that Lothric Civil War needed kind of more development, right? So like, yes, what you're kind of positing does make sense in a, it can be solved that way. It can kind of explain that connection. A little bit more kind of like relevant detail or conclusion on that feels necessary, only because
absolutely. Yeah.
We spent so much time, that Lothric Civil War is one of the first things you see evidence of, like some of the the first things with like cool little tantalizing hints that things are, it's cool.
Yep.
Like it's a cool story. And that would have been a good place to put a little bit of, a little bit of support, a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
So like when you say that, it makes it seem like somebody maybe changed their mind halfway through. Like I could buy that.
Yeah.
Where these things filled a gameplay function, but they decided not to, go further with them.
Yeah.
Then that maybe
and like as someone who like does like things explaining like that whole like 45-minute thing I made about the plot of Dark Souls 3. I don't want people to think that like that's me saying, if you didn't pick this up, that's your fault. Like that's not to my mind like a redemption of the storytelling in Dark Souls 3.
No.
Like the storytelling in Dark Souls 3 is not well done. The fact that you can tease like not even a story, but like a collection of themes out of it, if you go and read a bunch of books about Shinto, doesn't necessarily make the story good. The
parallel there is that just because Lobos Jr. can beat a boss with his bare hands doesn't make it good either.
Yeah.
Like you can, do these very, very challenging things. They're possible.
Yeah.
Like it is possible to make these connections. It doesn't mean that that's well optimized.
Yeah. Possible doesn't equal good. Like, did we learn nothing from Jurassic Park? And the thing is, like, it's the 70% problem again, because fainting toward the idea that somebody misinterpreted a more complicated or sinister force as an angel, and that started a holy war. First off, that's got shades of like what happened in New Londo, so that's pretty cool too. But like that is a cool story. They could have leaned into it and just like put something in that connected it, but no, we just have this 30% kind of vague, dissatisfying void between those two.
Yeah, and it's gratifying when I talk to you guys, or when I. Really the consensus, at least of people I've talked to, that it is different now, because there is an idea out there that like it's always been like this, and the idea that the previous games were any more cohesive is an illusion, and that drives me nuts, because I've been following these really closely. Like I'm not trying to pull authority on anyone, but like this series has been a significant part of my life for 4 years now.
Yeah,
and so I feel like I can tell that when the temperature in the water is changing.
Yeah,
it's not my imagination.
Yeah. Well, if we only ever got Cuck Smasher 420 on as a guest, we would probably change our tune.
Cuck Smasher's always busy though.
Like we were talking about this like before we were recording, that like people don't go all the way through Demon Souls, all the way through Dark Souls, all the way through Dark Souls 2, all the way through Bloodborne, and then arbitrarily decide at this point that the bosses are too difficult and the story is confusing. Fuck this. Like,
it was fun. It's that critical. Here's a TV tropes term. It's like critical existence failure is the thing they use, and I always think about that, where like you can have one hit point left and you're walking around and you're fine, and then like something scratches you and you're all of a sudden go from 100% to dead. Like it's not going to be that, where like it's just it was fine up until this point. I have exactly enough tolerance for 400 hours of game being this, and then once you get to the 401st hour, it's all of a sudden a bridge too far.
So
see this first one, as we mentioned, you run into the kind of grub or tree thing. They look like they're coming out of the ground to me, but they might have been coming out of a shell or something like that. The grub tree that controls this angel, you run into him, kill him, and that teaches you the lesson of how to get rid of the angels. This is going to be a mechanic, the kind of for the next little area of hunting these things down. It is like a remix between Old Yarnum and 4-2.
Yeah.
Or the Catacombs. So it's design space they've used before. It is design space I like, usually.
Yeah.
There are not enough areas that are free of being shot. It kind of, I feel fatigued by it.
Yeah.
Once you actually can go back and explore, it is kind of a cool area. But this first section, when you're running like crazy, goes on for longer than I want it to.
Yeah. I've warmed up to it in hindsight, but in the moment, it was definitely, fatiguing is the right word for it.
Yeah.
So past this angel is a small little church, and this has Lothric statuary. It has Lothric knights. We have a variation on the Lothric knights. They're overgrown. So they've got plants kind of coming around on them. They look like they're on their way to being like the Herald Knights. They don't fight that differently, given their state. But there is one of them here that carries a spear you can get later on. It's like a banner carrier that will buff people who are nearby. So it kind of functions like those clerics from Lothric Castle.
Yeah.
No, it's a cool looking weapon. It's a PvP co-op weapon that like I'll probably I would never use, but it looks neat. I watched the moveset today, like the ghost banner that shows up is cool.
Yeah.
You head through this. We're going through a fountain square with kind of dead Lothric combatants. Kind of again more evidence of this
Civil War
thing that we saw, and you can kind of go around these side areas and get some gear and some rings. It's worth noting that all the rings in this whole DLC are just +3 versions of stuff we've already seen. There's nothing new that shows up, which is fine. It's just it becomes particularly silly at a later point.
It might not be as silly as it first looks, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll get there.
No, it's one of those things. Like we'll get there when we get there. But I don't. It's disappointing without being illogical.
Right.
Yeah. Like it can make a sense. I still think that it is underwhelming.
Yeah.
Like again, you can make a version of it that makes sense. It doesn't make it good.
Right.
As a thing. Yeah. And then this is where I admit that the first time I went through this area until I came back for my cleanup round, I totally missed Lap.
Oh.
Yeah, same.
I just didn't see him at all. Like
yeah, and like you were saying before, a lot of this DLC is about keeping the player moving, which is not a good fit for there is an NPC here that you can very easily miss, because I missed him completely because he's not on the critical path. He's on a little side path.
No.
And he's on a side path directly after like 2 much stronger than normal Lothric Knights attack you. So I just ran past them. And I missed him completely. And it's so weird that like he's positioned after the first fork. Like you would think they would put him like at least stick a little area before this where you can't miss the guy. But
well, also between this tower falling over, which is a cool dramatic moment, like everything here is so precarious, and the next bonfire, there's basically nothing. And so you will get to this bonfire thing. All of that's behind me, and then never go back and see that tower falling over creates like a bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Given that the design of this area, it's Dark Souls 2-ish in a way that like, or Demon Soulsy, that you can't go back because you're dropping.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of incentive to go back and re-explore it because there's no way to turn. You have to actually walk back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's you don't do a lot of backtracking in post teleport everywhere Dark Souls anyway.
Yeah.
I only found that because I was looking for help on the Demon Prince, and the guides or wiki pages were alluding to this NPC being summoned that I had no idea who it was. So that any port in a storm that helped me go back and find him. Otherwise, I would have missed him as well.
For people who are waiting for us to say anything kind of unequivocally good about the DLC, I think all of this stuff with Lap works really well.
Oh yeah.
Like I honestly think it's kind of good and touching almost. Like I think the ending with this character is good. I'm totally fine with him being here.
Yep.
And I like this idea of this take on the character. It's weird to me that they can kind of continuously come up with new approaches for this. So this is Lap, who is Patches. Just again, everyone who's played this knows the thing. Well, we talked about Gale like a bunch. So this is Patches, but it's Patches gone hollow. Like Patches has lost his memory, and what happens when somebody who is like a total ne'er-do-well, like shithead, loses their memory? Every time this happened before this, they kind of turn into this kind of confused Alzheimer's metaphor, or they go crazy and attack you. What if it takes a bad person and turns them good?
Yeah, like he's a super amiable, solid bro.
like what is the flip side of the clean slate, and that's a super cool place to explore, and I wish that they had done some things other than just this character, but I think this is actually really successful.
To me it's like I agree with what you're saying, but I was kind of let down by it because I think the game doesn't expect you to twig that it's Patches for a while. Like it's there's this weird bit where he gives you a Siegbrow and he's talking about like a toast, and that's like kind of because after the Cathedral of the Deep you had Patches impersonating Siegvard, and I'm thinking like, do the developers actually think that Patches and Siegvard sound the same and we're genuinely confused by this, or is this just a reference? Because it was just like, it was weirdly baffling to me, because I remember when Vati, because he played it before other people, was saying like, oh, this guy shows up and he's got Patches' voice actor, and everyone was like, oh, it's Patches. And I was like, well, not necessarily, because the guy who voices Patches is also like, he's the voice of Lautrec in Dark Souls 1 as well. So they could have just asked him back to play another character. Like, it would be weird for it to be Patches, and then it is just Patches, and it's really obviously Patches. And I'm like, are they going somewhere with this? Like, are they gonna like double bluff me or something? And like, no, it's just, you go through all this shit, and the reveal is that it's Patches, and it's like entertaining on its own. But the whole time I'm thinking, like, is this really it? Like, are they sincerely trying to? Do they actually think? Is this a joke, or do they genuinely think I'm confused?
Are they fucking with me?
Because he's really hard to find. Like, you can miss him here, and then where he is later on is like a really dangerous area to go. And you go through all of this ridiculous puzzle to get him to remember who he is, and the payoff is that it's Patches. And I'm like, I kind of gathered that because he's literally saying it's Patches' voice actor saying Patches' dialogue.
Yep. I just like you see him. I forget exactly where it's at, but he is in Patches' squat.
Yeah. That's the part where, like, when I went back, that like I figured, definitely cop to it.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, oh, he teaches you the squat. Okay. Because I'd missed that the first time around on this character, because this character was no nonsense, no NPC shit. Just get to the, just level up. Because of my second run through.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Gary that this is pretty successful, and his dialogue is kind of a return to a form of hollowing that we haven't seen since Dark Souls 2. So again, this is a transplant that has worked well. This idea of losing your identity or not having your purpose, and him, starting out so happy, and then like he gets to a really dark place before you save him, if you decide to opt to save him. It was good to see that is still a component of this, and it wasn't like retconned away. Yeah. So when he shows up, and the dialogue here is also very funny. It becomes weirdly self-aware and familiar and jocular in a way that hasn't been until the very end. I mean, this goes ahead, but he says like, "And a good Dark Souls to you, a good Dark Soul to you." That's a expression here. And here he's like, "What can I say? I'm a bloody hollow, for heaven's sake!" Like, this is weirdly self-aware. At a certain point. His purpose here, his quest, he's looking for something called the Purging Monument, which would be similar to the Shrine of Amana, that would, reverse his hollowing, because these blasted stones don't seem to be doing so much anymore.
Yep. Which, because he's definitely going hollow, which we haven't seen definitively suggested before.
Right.
Also near here, you can find a pretty cool miracle, Projected Heal. This is your first, like, cure wounds on somebody else spell in the series. Like, up until this point, you could always kind of set a heal area or have an area effect, but this actually allows you to cast it on somebody else.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah. Even those who had forgotten the caress and bounty of the Princess of Sunlight did their best to recall her image. The stories spun about her were most certainly childish, yet gravely sincere. Amazing chest ahead. High five, buddy. Jinx. I thought I was making a stretch, but yeah, you got it. Anyway, it's weird that they would acknowledge that obliquely. But yeah, so the way forward is to go through this alley and to make another kind of lengthy leap as the camera pans up to reveal a fallen windmill. And if you explore around the base of this fallen windmill, you find some poison bugs. We haven't seen those in a while. I racked my memory trying to think if they're in Dark Souls 3. And
no, they are.
Oh, they are?
Like they're
Where
in the
Yeah,
swamp.
they're in the woods.
Ah, shit. Fuck me then.
Woods.
But
It's okay. Like, no need to fuck you. It's okay.
but when you rest at the bonfire and you go to the travel, this is the ruins of Earthen Peak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite area and the most significant of places. I guess this is the anemic township that is now the equal of the Seat of Kings.
This was the second, like, oh, that wouldn't happen moment for me during the previews, where everyone's like, it's a windmill, it's Earthen Peak. And I'm like, Earthen Peak doesn't have a monopoly on windmills. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And of course, no, it's Earthen Peak. Okay.
Whatever.
Never mind.
I alluded to this earlier. This bugs me a lot, and the reason it bugs me is because that windmill is the reason why it was Earthen Peak, right? Like they needed something that you could immediately recognize from Dark Souls 2, and that's it. Whereas for all of the dismissal that Dark Souls 2 gets as a story, like Earthen Peak was about something. Like there are themes that it dealt with, whether it did successfully or not, right? Like. This is an area that trucked in unrequited love and jealousy and stuff. None of those things are used though. It ends up reminding me a lot of Ready Player One, where it's like I'm just going to kind of portray these things, but nothing about them is important. It's just that they're representing like an era or a decade or something like that. So I'm not saying I wanted a little side story about jealousy that shows up here. It's just like if Dark Souls 2 was going to come back, this is literally the most perfunctory way it could come back.
The most shallow.
Yeah.
Way.
The best I can make of this is like Earthen Peak, famously connected to Iron Keep via the invisible elevator. But like if you leave that to one side for a second, if you accept that like Earthen Peak implies it's up really high, I think it maybe the idea is like it was the tallest point of Drang Lake. So it's the last place to sink, and that's why it's still here. That's the best I can make of it.
Yeah, possibly.
I was talking to a friend about it, and he said, I think the reason is boobs. And I think he's on the money.
It could definitely be, because we're going to run into some old friends, the sexy sorceress.
Yes. It's okay, though, because unlike other women, she didn't use her beauty for evil.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
We get back into the weird, like men going their own way allegory world of Dark Souls 2.
Yeah. It's the culture war on the comments of that.
Oh, God.
It makes me so sad.
So if you ran into Lap the first time, because I definitely would have run in, if he showed up after you, if you didn't trigger him, I would have seen him here, even though I missed him. He shows up by the second bonfire. And says, hey, there are some treasures in this nearby swamp. You should go get them. This is also a pretty big clue that somebody's encouraging us to get treasures.
This is when I tweaked it was Patches. Like, there's no way it's not him. Yeah.
It's a Titanite slab, and you can go get it. Yeah. But the nice thing is, if you don't go get it, new nice Patches will go get it for you.
Yeah. It's like, it seemed like you were taking a while, so I just went back. Yeah, pretty good. I don't know if there's any more to say about that. Like, this is not the last that we're going to see of him, because we have we are responsible for unleashing Patches back on the universe. So these ruins are kind of surrounded by a very wide open kind of like killing field. And this is where it really is like a cover-based shooter. We have an angel that is hovering above, and we have these shacks and these walls that we need to duck behind and wait for it to kind of like take a breath so we can do another dash. And there are these thralls that will actually like show you at one point, like, you don't want to run forward, kind of run backward.
Yeah, the thralls will go make an example of themselves.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't mentioned this yet, but the angels, like, they will kill anything they hit. It's not like an enemy, like, thing.
Right.
If they hit anything, they'll damage it.
Yeah, they're not.
They're more they're an environmental hazard rather than an enemy.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. If you decide to head further forward and further out, there's a little cliff outcropping that is difficult to get to when the angel is active. But this gets you the giant door great shield, which does not mention the two knights from before. These are heirlooms of another knight, you just kind of wield them.
Dude, and there's just one of those little one-line evocative, like, and actually very Dark Souls 2-esque. Who was known as protector of the meek but failed to protect anyone. It's actually X, but actually the opposite of X is the thing that happens in the worst of Dark Souls 2 item descriptions. And we mentioned that war banner you can get. You're trying to make your way down to the swamp, and again, you can't stop during any of this. And now here's the third fourth mechanic to stop you from stopping, which is Poison Swamp. It's an old one, but still counts. You cannot stop and if you get double, if you stop in this whole Poison Swamp, you're getting poisoned and cursed from the angel.
Yeah.
That you're running through, which is just bonkers.
Yeah.
So you kind of continue to run through. I got lost here for a long time because I couldn't find the angel, and I didn't know. I think the critical path here is kind of tricky to find.
So I'm going to need somebody to tell me what the critical path is. Does the critical path go through the swamp? Because I wasn't able to go forward until I determined that I needed to make a running jump near that shack on the cliff.
I think that is
the
actually...
critical path is like you go up a route. But it's like it's positioned in such a way that you wouldn't think you can climb it because of the angle it's on. But you just kind of walk up it when you move to it.
No, I climbed a lot of routes. I found the Tube Man, and I found a lot of the other stuff that this swamp area had to offer. What I did not find was a way forward.
Yeah, it's past that. You head up, and then you can kind of go to the left from there. There's a shortcut, which is what you took, which I wish I had found, but I didn't. That's the faster way without going this
drops
back way.
you onto the shack that you did the running jump onto.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. So this swamp, again, it's very earth and peaky. If you go up and around, you're going to find a desert pyromancer Zoe, which is again a recurrence of the scantily clad pyromancers from the earth and peak. This is cool armor. But yes, it is just a fight. It's not like an invasion. Like, this is just a person who lives here now.
And I had a real hard time
she's got
with
a
this
unique
too.
NPC name. She's not an invader, but she has the name like above her when you lock onto her. Like if she's
She's got two thralls with her, which made this tough for me. Which like thralls individually are not a big deal, but I also at this point was kind of at the end of my rope, like after being angel shot and was in poor shape. By the time I found this place, and ended up just never fighting Desert Pyromancer Zoe. I just ran past her.
Yeah.
You can lure her out on the roofs and then kind of juke around her, which is what I did.
Yeah.
Because her thralls kept stunning me, and she threw fireballs at me that one-shot me, so I got sick of it.
I just got her to fall off the side because she's programmed to she'll always roll if you shoot an arrow at her. So I just shot a couple of arrows at her without knowing this is how it worked, and she just rolled off the side and into the swamp. And then I just ignored her and just kept going.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. There's another thing here. Like, you go into this cavern that is full of the Herald Knights to get the Titanite slab, but it's full of poison. And why would you do that to yourself?
A slab is not that attractive to me at this point.
No.
Yeah, and this is kind of when the Herald Knights start to get irritating because there's it's 3 of them, and they can come out of the ground.
Yep.
And at this point, it's so you fought the one guy, which was fine. You were in a little environment where you could engage with him, and now it's there's 3 of them at once slashing at you, and you can kind of do a plunging attack, but you have to run all the way up the route again.
Yeah.
So sort of immediately, I kind of lost my goodwill for the Herald Knights at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gets way worse. This is not the epitome of that.
I came away hating these things.
Yeah, which sucks. I would have liked it.
I went from I love this, it's so cuddly, to fuck, I hate this in space of an hour.
The sword is pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
So you're ultimately kind of trying to wind your way around to the very tip of the fallen windmill, which has a bonfire and another one of these exposed outcroppings that you want to run along and then jump out of. And so this is where you can summon Slave Knight Gale, and you can also summon Lap for this. Both of them are kind of champs. You can't summon both of them, I think. And this is a fight that really benefits from co-op. And I think
before we talk about it, we have to talk about this message that Gale gives you.
Yes.
I think this is the second time this comes up, this message. I think it's funny, though. I criticize these jumps. I don't like these drops very much, but literally the developer saying, try jumping, you won't die, I think is kind of funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was okay.
Well, it's also try jumping is the canonical. It's weird. They made a tool for the entire community to cry wolf. And then the one time where they actually needed it, they had to do something custom to tell you, wait, no, really.
Yeah, it is literally Cry Wolf, because that is something that like people have been trolling me with since the very beginning.
They've been trolling me with
take
this
a step forward,
for 8 years.
Yeah, yep. But you head down and you fight this M boss, which has a couple different names, but it starts out as the Demon in Pain and the Demon from Below.
So this is a co-op kind of boss fight. You have two large enemies, two different health bars. Unfortunately, that's it. You're just kind of dealing with them and in this large environment, and there's nothing waiting behind them.
Yes, yeah, it never turns into anything else.
Yeah.
So when you first go down here and you barely beat them and you use arrows and cheese the last little bit because you're dying, and then nothing else happens. It's a great relief.
It really is. It shows that they're really turning a new leaf. So again, this is something that has gotten better as I've gotten distance from it. This fight, now that I'm not like literally losing 2 nights to it.
This was your Waterloo.
Yeah, like things got dark.
I remember seeing on Twitter about it.
I believe that I called I called the series a shambling circus that I have yoked my career to. At that point, I think I was rage drinking as well. So who knows? But it's like it was pretty rough. Before it got to that point, though, like having these two roughly identical enemies that can kind of trade off and change state is pretty cool, because like when one is ignited, it is more aggressive and focuses on kind of melee, whereas the other one's going to kind of like hang back and spit like this toxic breath at you.
I thought like this would be the worst boss, and it's actually probably the best designed of the 3. Because like I thought it was just going to be, we're doing Bell Gargoyles again, only instead of gargoyles, it's like 2 copies of the Demon King from Izalith.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, the design is actually quite well considered in that they switch active and passive states. So like when one's active, you go around, the other one won't be that aggressive, but he will be poisoned. So then they trade throughout, and that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's something I ended up probably because of my general fatigue with Dark Souls 3, I tried this a couple times by myself, died just a normal number of times, ended up bringing in Gale for it, and actually had a pretty good time.
I brought in Gale when I did it.
Yeah, fighting one of these demons is pretty fun. Having him kind of distract one, and you want, the money demon is the poison demon. If you have him kind of down, you can
the one who is poisoned at the start of the fight.
Yeah, either one of them that's powered down.
Okay.
I mean, is the one that I think that is much easier to fight. The kind of their whole thing is they're very aggressive. When they're turned off, they just kind of hang back. They shoot, spit poison. It's not too big a deal. And then they flame on. And their kind of primary attack, which we didn't mention this, we talked about the Herald Knights, because I think this is a clever little bit of design, is this many hit combo that constantly drives forward. This series of swipes forward. Yeah. That mirrors something the Herald Knights do. So the way that if you're fighting the Herald Knights and you're like, I can't just back away from this forever, or I have to back away for this longer than I think I do, kind of trains you in a cool way to fight these things, because their attack is very similar. I don't think there's a lore purpose behind that. I just think that, it's just kind of a cool little bit of design. And essentially you can kind of get in occasional hits when they're aggro and then wait for them to power down again while Gale deals with the other one. That little bit at the beginning of this, though, we were, and this first part is not too bad. Right. You take out one, and then it's just the remaining one. He's kind of a breeze. But then this turns into the second phase of the boss fight. So it is a final variation, a double boss that turns into a single boss, is a new thing. It's kind of like Abyss Watchers, but a little bit different.
Completely new health bar, yeah.
New health bar turns into the Demon Prince, who, again, I also don't think is, like, super, super bad. I had it. If I did okay in the first round, I did well in the second round. If Gale did okay in the first round, I did okay in the second round.
Yeah. When I eked by on fighting the Demon in Pain and the Demon from Below, it really, it was like, okay, cool. And then he gets back up. I was like, it was probably the biggest fuck you I've felt, at least in recent memory. You know, it's always fraught to say the biggest, but like I was like, oh, they're gonna goddamn do it again. It felt like too much. And again, there's a cool decision that goes into this, because depending on which of these demons he revives from, he gets a different kind of powers. So if he comes up from the Demon in Pain, he gets the ability to shoot these like fire lasers, which will like sweep back and forth as his like super special move. If he revives from the Demon from Below, he creates these like floating fireballs that shoot meteors at you. And I found the latter of those, the meteors, to be impossible to dodge and impossible to actually understand where they were coming from, and also incredibly powerful. So like I had to beat this guy I had to beat him in laser mode.
I actually never saw laser mode, so I didn't know there was laser mode until I read about it later.
Oh, well.
I don't know what it was, but I always saw fire mode.
I never got laser mode, but I knew about this mechanic because Vardy had talked about it. But I got the Meteor version. But I fought this guy twice. I got Meteor both times.
Yeah. And the Meteor, I also had a hard time dodging it, but I thought the rest of his attacks were pretty easy to dodge.
Yeah.
So it was always a health tax when the Meteors came. Like I was not good at dodging them. And for the record, I've never liked that mechanic. I don't like it when the Demon King does it. I didn't like it when the Living Failures did it. I didn't like it when Rom did it. Like I don't really like things coming from points in the sky that are hard to kind of keep your eye on. But it's just I ended up having enough health after a couple tries to where I could, tank it essentially and be okay.
Yeah, it's again going back to that thing about like the DLC. The challenge a lot of people were facing was more of a numbers game than a moveset game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like, because I came in here with a +5 Black Knight shield, and it was like no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make a big difference too. Like,
yeah.
So it should be noted a couple of things here that are frustrating to me. So one, these are demons. I don't care for that. Demons are canonically gone.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to go back on that.
As long as there is but a single flame, he will revive.
I mean, they tell us that, but I can't think of, why, like any kind of pathos you got from killing the Demon King is erased here.
Yep.
This idea that you're kind of mercy killing the last of his kind, which was kind of cool. Like I don't love the demon ruins, or that lake in Dark Souls 3, but it was kind of neat. That's kind of just erased here. You're also in the ruin of the Firelink here.
Shrine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Firelink Shrine.
Dark Souls 1 Firelink Shrine, not Dark Souls 2.
Yes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and so you can see.
I thought that might be the case. Can you cite some features of it? Aside from just the depression in the middle.
The depression, and then the well is at the same length, and the little stairway that go around are the same. Yeah. Same kind of distancing. So this is Dark Souls 1's representation in this chronological strata.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why would their Demon King be in Dark Souls 1 in the middle of this thing? Like, why? I don't know why this Demon Prince is here at all. Do you have an answer for this?
I have two.
Ooh.
They're not very good.
Okay.
But like I've been thinking about it. Like, if he's the Demon King, this is like the worst explanation I can come up with is like Demon King is seeking fire, so he's gone to Firelink Shrine because that's where the fire was in Dark Souls 1. Mm-hmm. But like, I think really the way that we leave this place is to go down the door that Frampt comes out of in Dark Souls 1. So like, I think it's really there to signal to us that like, okay, we're going somewhere that's like before Dark Souls 1 in this like geological strata. You've gone from like Lothric, which is Dark Souls 3, Earthen Peaks, Dark Souls 2, Firelink Shrine's Dark Souls 1, and now because we're going somewhere that everyone's been flagging up, like this is from the dawn of the Age of Fire. It kind of works like symbolically going down that like pit that Frampt came out of to somewhere that's like older than that.
Mm.
It's still so that explains why Firelink was chosen from Dark Souls 1.
Yeah,
but there's no association between, and I guess like if the demons are seeking fire, like there is fire in Firelink. There's fire in a lot of places in Dark Souls 1, specifically one I can think of that demons are associated with that like makes that kind of sense. It ends up feeling like Mad Libs to me. Like I don't understand.
Talk about this is the demon that Lorien fought.
Yes, even though they kind of half erased that.
Yeah.
Which is super weird.
Because there is but one flame.
Yeah.
So
they changed the item description. Yeah. So there'll always be demons, right? So like demons have always been not my favorite part of like Dark Souls lore anyway. They're kind of weird. We already have like, a lot of times the humans are versus dragons. Like the actual story of the Witch of Izalith is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of continued relevance throughout the series, and their kind of increased relevance in 3 is very strange to me.
Yeah.
And there's something that like is explicitly they're an accident. The Witch of Iceland accidentally creates demons when the Chaos Flame goes wild. So it's not like they're like a part of the world like dragons are. Like you could say, dragons will endlessly... Yeah. All this thing will endlessly revive. Like, no, these are things that should not exist. And the idea that now they're like yoked to the rest of the world, they're going to endlessly revive is like kind of... Oh, God.
I felt like oh, this is the last little bit of content. We have to have a demon fight. We have to have a duel. We have to have a dragon. And they're just kind of checking off boxes. But I just was so happy. Like when demons came back in Dark Souls 3, I wasn't like, yes. But again, like any amount of pathos that there was in killing the last demon, like out of the things, and like one of the things I criticized Dark Souls 3 with is that it's trying to express this idea that no, shit's serious now. It really is the end of the world. I know we told you it was the end of the world many times before, but now it really is. And killing the last demon is actually like a step towards that, right?
Yeah.
Like that actually feels like that supports their theme. And then just to kind of be like, no, at the end of the world, there's still demons. Like it just, I don't know. It just did not work for me as a thematic thing. Like I don't get it.
It's
it really, it bums me out. Like as a, I don't know.
The other thing about this boss is he looks a lot like a bat. And like people who've data mined the game, like before the DLC came out, found there was a boss called like the Giant Bat. So I'm starting to wonder if like this is a Sanctuary Guardian situation where like they had the boss designed, cut it, and they're like, oh, I guess we'll shove it in the DLC when that comes out.
They walk exactly like fruit bats. When they walk on the ground, they walk just like fruit bats crawl on those vines to get sweet bananas and mangoes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, if you just drop down into something that you could, without the boss fight, more easily recognize as Firelink, and there was nothing there, again, if it just climbed off of your dick for a fucking second.
Yeah. It would be awesome to explore ruined Firelink. Like that would have been a meaningful moment.
Yeah.
And it's like it does this thing that the DLC is going to constantly do where it kind of starts invoking the primordial serpents and it goes nowhere.
Yep.
Oh man, that's gonna
up until the thing ended, I was expecting like it's like Krusty's gonna be here soon. Kat's gonna be here soon. You've been talking about Kat all game, and now there's statues of him.
Kathy doesn't get here. One of the things about this fight too, when you talk about the early version when it was a bat, one of the cool, or not, I guess it's not cool. One of the things that's been interesting though is because of the Dark Souls video content mill. One of the things that pops out all the time are like predictions based on trailers. And those have been really like interesting to see how kind of off the mark a lot of those are, not because the people who are making them are dumb or wrong. They're doing, they were predicting things that would make sense.
Yeah.
And then just the DLCs refused to make sense. So one of the things people were saying was like, oh, these things look a lot like when they showed this boss in the trailer, they're like, oh, it looks a lot like the demons that carry you from, Sens to, Orlando. I was going to say Londor, but that's already a different thing. God, like I understand those things are on purpose, but but like it looks a lot like one of those things, and a lot of people were convinced about that, and even in our Slack channel, people were talking about like what that could mean. And I was like, oh, those things are an Easter egg for Demon Souls. I don't want them to mean anything, but people were like, that's what it looks like, and I was, okay, well, they're going to bring those demons back. Those demons are going to have a big important plot thing, and then that didn't happen. But what they replaced it with made less sense and is also unsatisfying. So I'm not like happy with it just being
like
another
similar
demon.
Like to we'll meet an important character later on who like was in the trailers and everyone had their own theories about them. And I would prefer literally any of those theories to what we got.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then just something new that like doesn't make tons of sense. So you get this thing Soul, which I guess, and again initially. It said the Demon Prince, after his defeat DeLorean, retreated beneath the earth and lost the memory of the flame that burned within him, marking the end of demonkind. But then they retconned it to say the demons, birthed from a common chaos, share almost everything between them, even the pride of their prince and his nearly faded flame. So the last demon standing may rekindle it.
Yeah, which describes the fight pretty well. Right.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, there you go. That is what happens, so, okay, cool. Good for, plus for, story and mechanics lining up, negative for the cosmic implications.
And there's kind of like a nice little thematic thing there with like Lorien and Lothric being two princes who are joined together, and here you've got the two demon princes who are joined together. Yeah.
So we kind of continue through here as you mentioned, Richard. We go through the area that Kath would have come up after picking up the small envoy banner from this corpse envoy banner that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a small banner used by the envoys of Lord Gwyn in the days of yore for the pygmies who took the Dark Soul. The Great Lord gifted the Ring City, an isolated place at World's End, and his beloved youngest daughter, promising her that he would come for her when the day came. What's that last sentence? Isn't that great?
Yep. And at this point, the narrative completely collapses in on itself.
Yeah, and that's probably a good place to end this first episode.
It really is. Yeah. As Gwyn, or I guess as we start doing that dance around like a Maury episode when like, oh, the kid's not yours. Like, yeah, we're going nuts. We're going insane with the revelation. But yes, we should end this. We got a lot more out of that than I expected from the Dreg Heap.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next one, we'll want to pick up the pace a little bit because we have 3 bosses to go through the next one.
Yeah.
And as much as this one was your Waterloo, one of the other ones was my Waterloo, and I have feelings on it. Yeah. Well, and then one of them is also the Waterloo I didn't beat. So I guess 2 of them were my Waterloo.
Yeah, I did beat Medea because I figured neither of you were going to do it.
Oh yeah, I said fuck it.
Yeah. I think at least one of us should have.
Yeah, like there's not going to be any food down there. Like we're going to play the long game.
Yeah, I did the cheat code of watching it beat on YouTube.
Yeah.
So the next episode will cover the rest of the DLC. If you're listening to this, there is not time to do your responses. We're recording that the same day this comes out. So hopefully you've already sent those in. Richard, thank you for joining us for this first episode. You'll be sticking around for the second one as well. But for people listening now, where can they find you online?
You can find me online at a YouTube channel which I stupidly called Jerks on Frontier. If you just look up Bloodborne up close on YouTube, you will find it. That's probably easier because all the words are in English. And I have my most recent thing is my stream playthrough of the Ring City, which I did when this first came out. And I will be back soon making more stuff about Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. Cole, what can they do if they want to help out the show?
Well, we have a Patreon, as people are very well aware. You can go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv and kick in a couple of bucks a month. That doesn't just support this show. We do several others on the network that we'd really love if you went and checked out. If you haven't done that so far. Chief among them, watch out for Fireballs, which is a similar kind of close look approach to this, except a little bit more zoomed out about used to be just retro games and now kind of more generally games. And also like Abject Suffering, if you like the tangents and comedy, that is us, kind of almost talking about bad games.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to bring up is that as the time you're listening to this, there are scant hours left if you want to back my book on Kickstarter. If you go to my Twitter page, you'll see it. It's also all over social media. I will probably be insufferable about it as those hours dwindle down. But I'm doing a second book in the Power World series, this time based on Fallout. The book is called Atomic. I've already made the goal, but I really do appreciate any continued support because it's going to allow us to do new and cool things as far as stretch goals go. So we have matched the goal where Cole will be doing an audiobook reading of it.
Hello.
You like Cole's voice. If you want his silky baritone all over your ears, you have yourselves to thank. Other future goals are pretty neat as well, including doing another serial comic, doing a serial commercial through it that is animated with my friend Noah Dorsey, and doing a series of game facts. Fake game facts for the game. So check out that stuff. I'd really appreciate your support. So if you want to do that, please pick it up.
Yeah.
This is different than the Patreon. This is pre-ordering a book. And people like the first book. I think if you like the first one, you'll like this one as well.
Yeah. And the first one is for sale at Duckfeed.tv/store.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I appreciate that too.
Yeah. If you do not normally listen to the appendices, I want to put a bug in your ear Just hold still for a second. No, stick around because we're going to be making some announcements about what we're going to be doing kind of next with this. So just keep that in mind. That's not for another 2 weeks, but that will be important, I think.
Yeah, you're going to want to listen to that because a lot of people ask us what we're going to do with the show, and we figured it out. So we're going to talk about that. Yeah, and I think that's probably it. What should they do until next time, Cole?
They should have made some coffee.
Yeah.
No. I should have made some coffee. Fuck.
Yeah.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
Umbasa?
Umbasa.
Umbasa.
I'm gonna get some water real quick. I know that we gotta get a move on, Cole. Are you okay, Cole?
Oh yeah, I'm not working tomorrow, so.
Oh great.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm actually gonna get a pop. I know that's unwise, but I'm just gonna get a Coke Zero so I can get a little pip in my step. BRB.
Yeah.
I'll be back in just a couple minutes.